Hi guys, this is Rajan Singh from HabitStrong, and once again we are here, and I have with me my colleague Samriddhi. And in this series of videos, we are going to just explore some personal stories and hopefully get some interesting anecdotes and lessons for all of us. So I'm going to now hand it over to my colleague Samriddhi. Please take over, and you are going to be questioning me. So carry on, please. Carry on.
Okay, so once again, Rajan has given me the honor of just picking his brain for the next 15 minutes or so. So I was thinking about it, again, what can I ask Rajan? And for those of you who don't know, Rajan has had quite the diverse career. So he started as an IPS officer, then he's been a management consultant with McKinsey, then he's been an investor, private equity investor, and then finally, at the peak of it all, he's been an entrepreneur. He is an entrepreneur. So I thought that for people who are kind of grappling with career choices, or even just people who are curious about like what all these different and amazing career paths look like, we should talk to Rajan about what was his experience and what are the differences between going down these different paths. So Rajan, my first question to you is, you went from, we talked about this a little bit in the last video as well. You went from an IPS career to something as high flying and fast paced as management consulting. Again, McKinsey is anyone who goes for an MBA, McKinsey is probably their dream job, so to speak. What was it like? What was the difference? What would you think are the biggest differences between this like high flying government career and high flying private corporate career?
Thank you, Samriddhi. High flying may or may not be the appropriate description, but let's go with that. Um, okay, so when I think about the government job, if I were to summarize in a few key aspects, so I'm talking specifically about the Indian Police Service. Government obviously is very broad. Now, the first thing that I would say stands out in the IPS or any, for that matter, any law enforcement job is what's your objective? Your objective is to uphold the status quo, not in a bad way. So when you're enforcing the rules, the laws of the land, and sort of the system, so the best day for a cop is nothing happened. In the sense that the city was safe, nobody got killed, no accidents, no crime. So your best possible outcome is no change. In consulting, every single day, the only goal you have is change. How can this company do better? How can we get better in our sales and marketing, build a better organization? So in some sense, I could think of these two as diametrically opposite. All right. Now doing a deep dive into the Indian Police Service as a career choice or just as a professional experience, the first thing that sort of stands out is what I just talked about. That it is every day you go, your goal is to do the same thing, enforce the law, make sure people follow it. If they don't, you follow a certain process. Yes, there is innovation, and there are obviously even when you try to do the same thing, the way you do it, the way you use technology, sometimes even internal processes, those things you can play with a little bit. But for the most part, your job is to do the same thing. So that's number one. Second thing is in the Indian Police Service specifically, whatever you do has a very direct impact on the lives of a lot of people. I'm stating the obvious here. Now, whether it is crime enforcement, traffic, even more so, practically everybody is exposed to those things. So, in some sense, you have a very wide canvas. If you're running a city police or a district police organization, 20, 30 lakh people would be affected by your actions. Maybe not all of them very directly, but certainly a good number. So, big canvas, but now comes a constraint. The first constraint is that in a government organization, you have an objective, and the standards can sometimes be pretty high. But when you have to deliver, you get a bunch of people. So, as an example, when I was serving running the Trivandrum City Police, we had about 17 police stations. So you have 17 sub inspectors, a few circle inspectors, a couple of ACPs, and a few thousand people in the whole organization. It's like you get a cricket team and you play with that cricket team. Now you cannot say, okay, can I get a better spin bowler? No, you have the bowlers. You have the fast bowlers, spin bowlers. You can move them around. So you can take one sub inspector from one police station, put him in another police station. That you can do. But apart from that, it's fixed. Now you might say, okay, how do I how do I create an incentive? Why should somebody want to work hard? So we will give them some financial incentive. Not possible. If one of them is really good, so let's say in a cricket team, as an example, somebody is really good. What happens? He becomes the vice captain, maybe the captain of the team someday. Here, everything is time bound. Every single promotion, seniority, everything is given. So essentially, it's like this: the levers or the sort of the control knobs that you have to change the organization. Those knobs, they don't exist. So it's a control knobless organization, if I can call it that. And yet you have to deliver what what the what the law of the land or what the constitution expects and what people expect every single day. It's pretty challenging. But on the now on the other side, on the plus side, you have people. Um, Financial resources are sort of fixed. They're not limited necessarily in a strict sense, but at the you have budget, etc. But then it's not like you can say, okay, let's have this new initiative and do something dramatically different. You can't. So it's like, so to summarize this whole thing, you have huge opportunity, at least a huge responsibility. You have a team, you have lots of people, but then you have to play within those very tight rules. You can't change anything, you can't incentivize anything, you can't promote anyone. Maybe you can do some punishment, but how much punishment is not the most effective tool. So it's like you are, sometimes you feel like you are very, very constrained, like your hands are tied, not literally, but you feel like, okay, in private sector, those guys can do whatever they want. They can hire new people, they can change anything. Here, everything is fixed. Go and do the best you can. But I would say, despite that, the fact that what you do makes an impact, I think is pretty relevant. Then, of course, there are these things like in India, they would talk about status, prestige, public recognition. So those are, I would say, more externalities. It's not core to the job. It's obviously, I'm not saying it's totally irrelevant. People obviously think about it, but those I'm not counting them in. All right. So this is how I would summarize a government job. Everything stays the same, and it's obviously there's bureaucratic. Rules are very rigid, and you have to just figure out within that constraint, how do you keep everything going steady? How do you make sure nobody gets killed, people safe, and so on? The private sector job, it's especially in consulting, it's the other extreme. The scope of your work in compared to in the IPS, it's very narrow. You're working with one particular company or you're working with one particular organization. Within that company, also your scope is maybe fix their sourcing process or maybe cut their cost in a certain part of the organization or help them fine tune some aspect of sales and marketing or build a new strategy. So instead of your canvas being really, really large, now your canvas becomes very small. But in that small canvas, you can do whatever you want. So you have that flexibility. Yeah, I have spent just to talk to some expert and I've held many of these expert conversations. So let's say, as an example, there was one particular project I was working on for some medical device company, and we needed some opinions from some of the top doctors in the US. Now, these doctors are the kind of, some of them would be almost at the level at which they would be like winning Nobel Prizes or people who are in that category. Now they don't come cheap. But we had no problem. Like if we had to pay $2,000 or even $5,000 for 1 hour conversation, we had no issues. We spent that money, get that thing. Whereas in a government organization, if you had to spend $5,000 to talk to a guy for 1 hour, you had to spend like 6 months, approval process and tendering and all kinds of, I'm not saying nonsense, but all kinds of, I would say, red tape you have to go through because that's how it is designed. So the choice is this. Government is like a big giant ship, but you can't change the direction very easily. It will take like many years, sometimes decades to even take a small turn. In a private sector, especially in consulting, it's like very small but very agile. But everything comes with pros and cons. The pros are obviously you have this flexibility, but one thing which I haven't talked about, which is that both the jobs are stressful, but in government, at least theoretically, you have 35 years of fixed tenure. Here in consulting or in many corporate, in many companies, but especially in firm like McKinsey, your standing is as good as your last project. One project goes down, that could be the end of your career. So you are like living on the edge all the time. Now in government also it was living on the edge. So in some sense, I went from living on the edge in one way. What is that? So in government, in IPS especially, every time there is a big riot or there is a big sort of public order crisis, I know if I mess this one up, any one of them, if I mess up, for next 30 years, people will remember me. Oh, he is that guy who messed up this rioting situation or this particular public order or this crowd control system, and so many people got killed. So you just have to mess up once, and that'll be your brand. In some sense, in that sense, it was the same thing. You mess up one thing and it's over. Right? So there are some very interesting similarities and some big differences. At the end of the day, both were challenging. Both were unfortunately stressful. Overall, I think McKinsey, for some reason, I don't know why, maybe because the projects it moved so fast, I would say it was in some ways more stressful. But again, they're all very, very different. And the to summarize the whole thing, Samriddhi, what I would say is it's not about this is good or that is good. It's about they are good in different ways and they are not so good in different ways. It's about what you appreciate. So, as an example, if I ask you to taste some dishes, and you have, let's say, a rasgulla or some sweet dish, and you have a, let's say, pani puri. Now, which is tastier? It's very hard to say. Some people may prefer rasgulla, some people may prefer pani puri, somebody may prefer pav bhaji. Now, they are all different. When things are different, which is better depends on whom you ask. So if you ask me to compare which is better, I don't know, depending on whom you ask. But for me personally, I would say they're both phenomenal experiences, and uh, I think of each of them as an opportunity I got to explore, to see there's a story of this blind man, and the elephant. So when they were asked to describe the elephant, somebody said, "Oh, elephant is like a trunk," and somebody said, "Oh, elephant is like the tail, elephant is like the leg." In some sense, the world is like an elephant. It's very complicated. There are lots of different parts to it. The people who are in private sector, for them, government is a mystery. People who are in government, for them, private sector is a mystery. For people in the US, for them, India is a mystery. I was fortunate enough that I have seen the elephant probably from a few more angles than what one would normally get to see. And my sense is that different aspects of the elephant, they're all interesting in very different ways. So yeah, so that's my answer. That's my
Nice.
answer.
I think it also, what you just said towards the end, Rajan, it made me realize like we always look at career as, something we need to take so seriously and it's our way of living life. But actually, the way you talk about it, the job you do could also be a way of understanding yourself and understanding the world you live in. So, in a sense, it goes beyond just like, this is what I need to do and this is how I need to live my life. So that's actually a very interesting perspective. I'm actually now going to make the question a little bit more tricky as well. So I've been an entrepreneur in the past, as you know, and I can say one thing for sure that, no matter what your past experience or what you've done, like this is something I've learned in my life that being an entrepreneur is the most scary and the most humbling experience probably that anyone can go through. So
Absolutely.
now so now my question is that now that you are an entrepreneur and you've been an entrepreneur for a while, how does that compare with everything that came before in the journey?
Okay, so the short answer is it does not compare. It's very, very different. But again, let me bring out some aspects. Well, I'll tell you the story. This was 2000, 2003, around that time. So one day I was sitting in my office. This was in the IPS, and so one of my staff members came and they asked for permission to. They said. I used to have a standby police jeep just in case there was some emergency. They said, "Can we send your police car to the police stations to give out salary?" And I was like, "Why do you want? What do you mean send a jeep to police stations? Are you giving salary in cash?" Then they said, "Yeah, we for police constables, for a lot of them, we give it in cash." And I said, "But there are like literally like 1,500 in the police stations, another same number in the armed reserve camp. And so you do all of that in cash?" They said, "Yeah, a lot of it goes in cash." And I said, "Oh my God, so then it must be a lot of money." They said, "Yeah." So then I said, "Okay, so how much money?" So they said, like right now, they said, they mentioned ridiculously high amount. Okay, I'll tell you the number. I think it was some 70 lakhs, 80 lakhs, or whatever. That was a cash. Okay. So I said, "I have never seen that cash. Can you show it to me?" They said, yeah. And I went there, I'm not joking. On the table, they had laid out because they were just packaging and it was being sent to with receipts and all the process. And when I saw that money on the table, I was like, oh my God, look at this. And I was thinking, I
Like
had
an
no
80s
idea.
Bollywood movie, Rajan, like
Yeah,
suitcases with
absolutely.
cash.
Like, I had no idea that so much money is going physically from through my office. There is a whole process, and I didn't ever have to think for a moment where will the salary come from, and that brings to the entrepreneurship. When you become an entrepreneur, the first thing that changes is every single time the first question in your mind is where will the salary come from. That's extreme, right? On the one side, it's not even a remotely a question. Other side, it is the fundamental question, especially if your startup is losing money, if you're burning cash, which I have experienced a lot, unfortunately. That was one big thing. So you are now, again, coming back to the scope. In the IPS, maybe I'm running a huge organization. Here, you are not responsible for the whole city or the whole district or the whole state, but you are responsible for maybe 20, 30, 40 people and your small team. But for that team, your responsibility is absolute. If the company doesn't do well, they can't be paid salaries. To pay the rent, to pay everything, it all falls down, it all comes to you personally. And that I think is one big difference. And anybody who wants to become an entrepreneur, remember this. On 1st of January, if you're in a big company, you will get this SMS notification. Your ICICI Bank or HDFC Bank or some saving bank has gone up by so many rupees. When you're an entrepreneur, you'll be figuring out how to how to trigger that SMS, and that's pretty scary. So that's like one big part. Second is when you're an entrepreneur compared to working in a company, the big difference is in McKinsey, you know your job, do your job well. Hard work, skill, that's practically what matters. When it comes to being an entrepreneur, yes, hard work matters, skill matters, but it's not enough. Unless you figure out a product, unless you figure out that what you're offering people really care about, you can work 24/7. You can work for years. You can raise venture capital to the tune of 10 million, $100 million. It doesn't matter. You can raise 1,000 crores. But if your product is not something which customers love, to no avail. So that was like one humble realization, and that's a problem which money cannot solve. Even your past experience, track record, nothing could solve. So you have to experiment and figure out what is it that we do as a company which customers love and they're willing to pay money and they are happy having paid money for your product. It seems like a simple question. This is called product market fit, but this, in my opinion, is the single hardest thing any human being can do. And as an entrepreneur, your job first and foremost is to get to this product market fit where people are willing to pay you money and they're happy to do that. And it is somebody, it is so hard. I'm sure you must have experienced, you cannot describe it. And I think that is what makes startup life really, really hard. Once you get to the point where you have product market fit, which means what you're offering, people, your consumers or your customers love that. After that, after that, entrepreneurship is very enjoyable. So when people say like it's fun, it's not completely off. But here's the thing, it's very binary. Until you get to that stage, it is a nightmare. Mark my words. Every single day, it's a nightmare. Once you get to product market fit, once you cross that stage, then finally it starts being enjoyable. In fact, if HabitStrong, that's one thing which people, most people who take our products, consume our or take our programs, they give good feedback, they're happy, and that is something which makes it an enjoyable experience. But in the past, I've been in the other, have worn the other shoes as well when we did not have that good product market fit, and that's challenging. So now there are, if you think of it, now we have covered three corners of the world. So there is the government job where everything is taken care of, but you have to somehow make it happen, and you cannot change all that much. Consulting where you can change everything. Everything is given. There's no uncertainty. What you do, people like it, but you have to struggle and slog. As an entrepreneur, you have to do everything. You have to slog. You have to figure out. But like I said, there is nothing more satisfying than having created or built something from scratch, which somebody values and which makes an impact on somebody's life. So I think this is the best provided you survive it and don't get killed in the experience.
Just as you were talking, I wanted to actually just add to that, and then you said it yourself. Because since I've been working at HabitStrong, it actually now I actually know what it's like to be an entrepreneur working on a product with product market fit, and really there's no high quite like it. So I totally get where you're coming from and what you're saying, and like you have been on the other side as well, and yeah, it really tests you, and it really in some ways like you dig deep into yourself and you find things about your character and your courage or your stupidity or like both extremes of who you are that you probably never even knew before this. So yeah, there's nothing quite like it. I think I was coming to one last question. Maybe we've answered it, maybe we haven't, I'm not sure. But I still want to ask you, Rajan, out of all of these experiences, what is the one that you would say has challenged you the most?
I have no doubt in my mind that while they've all been hard, the type of hardness was different. And as an entrepreneur, you face this existential crisis, existential question. What you do, will it be around tomorrow? And I believe that that question is the one that I have found the hardest to answer, and therefore I would say entrepreneurship is the hardest. So yeah, that's my take. That's my take.
Yeah, I think we got pretty deep into into some questions, which I actually really enjoyed. So I think that's it. I'm at the end of my questions. Thank you so much, Rajan. As always, it was really great chatting with you. Really great talking to you. I know we've talked a little bit about our startup HabitStrong, but in case your curiosity has been piqued, you're a little bit interested, we do have some free workshops that you can come and check out. I'll link somewhere on the screen and in the description below as well. And in the meantime, do let us know what other topics you'd like us to cover. We're very happy. As you can see, we really enjoy these conversations. So we're very happy to do as many of them as we possibly can. And yeah, that's it from our end. See you next week.
Thank you. Bye bye.